Mrs. Rogers?
Here.
Mr. Januso?
Here.
Mrs. Barney?
Here.
Mr. Roach?
Here.
Mrs. Durig?
Here.
Mr. Nicholas?
Present.
Mr. Brett?
Here.
Okay. Starting the meeting, do I hear a motion to approve the January 17th, 2023 minutes?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Januso?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Okay, the engineers report. I think we have Jake with us tonight.
Yes. Thank you. So the major item to discuss is Village of Lawrence. On your engineers' reports, there's a schedule there. I think that the only change there would be the Penvest closing date. So that's the approximate, that's the planned Penvest closing date of April 18th, 2023. Moving to the next page, there's more information on Village of Lawrence. The award letters have been issued to the contractors. We do not have signed contracts back yet. There's still some things we're working out, but anticipation would be within the next few weeks we're getting those signed contracts back. Also at that time, we're anticipating they're probably going to start submitting shop drawings as they want to hit the ground running on that. One other small item would be the contractor requested CAD files, our actual CAD files for their control points, things like that. Wanted to notify the board of that. We'll be sending them out to them this week. On the Penvest end, as I mentioned, we have an updated closing date of April 18th, and I think we need 2 resolutions.
Right, I can help on that.
Yes, please.
The 2 resolutions, is the order that we have for the engineer's report is the first one, motion for Penvest resolution to borrow in the amount of $18,078,512. If you remember, that was addressed previously, but now it's updated with the new amount of funds. So after our meetings with the Penvest folks as well as the manager, engineer, our recommendation is there be a motion passed for the resolution to borrow in the amount stated.
Okay, do I hear a motion as stated for Penvest resolution to borrow in the amount of $18,078,512?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Januso?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
And the second motion listed under the engineer's report is the motion for Penvest reimbursement resolution regarding the ability to finance the project on an interim basis. And the reason for this is that there's a likely possibility that we'll be using our own funds to pay for costs that will ultimately be reimbursed, and the impact of those funds and what they are available to be used for by the authority and what they're ultimately going to be used for and then reimbursed by Penvest requires this resolution for Penvest. So again, after our meeting with the Penvest group and discussion with manager and engineer, it's the solicitor's recommendation that that motion be passed as well.
Okay, I believe we spoke about this in previous meetings as well. So do I hear a motion for Penvest reimbursement resolution regarding the ability to finance the project on an interim basis?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please. Or, I'm sorry, any discussion first on this? Okay. Roll call vote?
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Januso,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Roach.
Aye.
Anything else, Jake?
Yes, just a few items on grants. The LSA 2022 grant application for Lawrence Phase 2. We did a presentation to the County Redevelopment Authority. That was held January 13th. Still awaiting a response on that. And for the H2O PA grant for Village of Lawrence Facilities Phase 1, there was comments back from DCED. I think there was some scope adjustments that need to be made, but that's in progress right now. And we'll get a response out on LSSE's end. And that's all I had.
Do you know possible dollar amounts for either of those grants?
I do not have the LSA grants. And on the H2OPA grant, we submitted a grant application for $880,000. That's the amount and the scope that I think there were adjustments that needed to be made based on, you can only have one treatment plant in at a time, one sewer shed in at a time, per grant application. I think that's the modifications that are required.
Okay.
Do you think that we would have feedback from both for the next meeting? I mean, I know that it's based on your judgment.
I would think we're gonna hear back from to be honest, I do not. I do
Okay.
not have a good handle on those.
All right, just
But I
looking
could,
for a
I could go to
timeframe,
Kevin,
that's
and I
all.
could get the answer for you.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. So moving on, I will make the motion to approve the change in payroll from a bi-monthly to a bi-weekly payroll. Do I
I'll
hear-
second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mr. Januso,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Roach.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve signing easement encroachment agreement for deck at 289 Francis Lane?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Do we need discussion on this one? Mike?
What we have here is there is a deck at Francis Lane. They're going to encroach into the easement approximately 4 foot. So we went out and took a look at the deck. It's going to be cantilevered over into the easement. The support pillars will be out of the easement. I made a couple recommendations on where the steps were originally located. They changed that around and moved it. Based on that, everything is where it should be. So I recommend signing that encroachment agreement.
Okay. Any other questions?
That's better.
Roll call vote?
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mr. Januso,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Roach.
Aye.
Okay, next up is the solicitor's report. Mr. Mo?
Okay, thank you. First item, the motion to execute railroad license agreement contingent on manager securing all necessary insurance policies and riders. You may remember from previous discussions that this railroad license agreement was being worked on by the previous engineer, KLH. There were multiple snags and impediments to getting to this point, but we're now locked in, and I think what Mike was trying to do is get ahead of matters a little bit so that if we got approval tonight contingent on his securing the necessary insurance criteria, then we can just proceed. It was a necessary check mark for proceeding with the project, and we so.
Yeah, what we need to do is we need to increase the umbrella, the liability umbrella, from the current $1 million up to $4 million. The preliminary quote for that we got back is about $2,400 a year. The other thing that we'll need LSSE to follow up on is I need to know the amount of the work that's going to be within 50 feet of the railroad. We need a value for that in order to get that portion of the policy quoted. I'm still waiting on that, so check with Kevin, Jake, I'd appreciate it. That's about the only holdup we have there, so I can give everybody a price, and then we can move forward.
I just wanted to mention that historically, when you deal with the railroads, their restrictions tend to be onerous, historically much worse than they are today. The requirement, so to speak, of the 4 million that's heavy. You know, most municipal authorities are probably in the range of 2 million, not 4 million, but there are a number that go higher now. But, you know, that's kind of the price you pay to deal with the railroad, and the numbers that they're charging are fairly reasonable. But, you know, based on historical context. But just so you know, if you hear that number 4 million, it's, yeah, it's a little high, but by the same token, they're to some degree the 800-pound gorilla when you deal with them, so.
Sure. Okay, so do we hear a motion to execute the railroad license agreement contingent upon the manager securing all necessary insurance policies riders?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Januso?
Aye, I'm sorry, I was muted there.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
You only have 3 other matters briefly. Everyone will recall that we're now involved in our 3rd piece of litigation with CHJA. And the reason you haven't heard much about this 3rd piece since it was initiated months ago was that it's been tied up in the courts with procedural motions that have been filed by Canonsburg. The first motion they filed was a motion for preliminary objection challenging the complaint. And once we briefed it and discussed it with them, they withdrew their preliminary objections, filed their answer, and put us in a position where we thought we'd be able to proceed. Then they filed another extensive motion called a motion for judgment on the pleadings, and that had to be briefed and argued with the court. And we just learned, I think you're the last of the boards that I'm reporting to on it, we just learned that we won and the court ruled in our favor. Preliminary motions are over, and now we can proceed with the case. Interestingly, Houston is close to being in default. They haven't answered, they haven't filed anything, and the municipal bodies are in agreement. We've had managers' discussions that we're going to attempt to default Houston if they don't respond. So you'll hear more coming now with this 3rd piece of litigation. You remember just historical context again. First piece of litigation was to challenge the 100% rate increase of CHJA, which we were able to get down to 28%. The second litigation was to challenge a proposed $26 to $28 million bond deal, which we were able to get down to about $8 to $9 million. And now this 3rd one has to do with the audit that was done that raised 2 issues. One issue is whether or not they handled their pension funds correctly. The second was these annual stipends that have been paid by CHJA to Canonsburg and Houston, and whether they were appropriate or legal. That's what's at issue. The only 2 other items, and naturally if there are any questions, happy to discuss. The only other 2 matters I wanted to mention that on Penvest, after one of our more recent conversations, Mike was kind enough to put together an outline of duties of everyone involved. and then has since been acted upon and discussed amongst the professionals. So thank you, Mike, for doing that. It was a nice kickoff for it.
Just makes it easier. There's so much stuff to cover on that Penvest closing, so we're just keeping everything straight.
And the last item, I circulated to everyone an article that I had written that could be used to help you sleep at night if you can't fall asleep. But it was written in the context of starting a construction project. And interestingly, very beginning of the article, I hadn't even shown it to Erin, and she had mentioned that was one of her concerns, the citizen acknowledgement or updating. But I thought it might be helpful from an overview standpoint for the board to see some considerations going into a significant construction project. So, and I don't know if you get does everyone get them, the magazines?
Yeah.
Chris and I have an article in the today, or that just came out, on litigation issues. Now that we're involved in litigation, it may be somewhat relevant as well. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. All right, business managers report.
Okay, your board packets included the December 2022 financial statements. Any questions?
No?
That's it for me.
Okay, next up is the authority managers report.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson. Jack, if you could, can you put the grit pump building, or the grit building up on there so everyone can see the doors? When I get to that portion of the report, I'd appreciate it. Item one, we've been talking about the purchase of some lab equipment. Last month, I gave a price on what it would cost for the analytical balance, the drying oven, the vacuum pump, and the microscope. I had 4 vendors. I took a look at a couple more just to make sure we were getting the best pricing. At the end of the day, that is the lowest quote of $4,180.14, and that is from Colonial Scientific. So that's who I would recommend going with, that lab equipment. And that cost, like I said before, can be spread out over all the treatment plants because we are using it all there, so it's not going to be all in one pot of money when it's tagged to its specific item in the budget. Item number 2, we've been talking about the doors for the grit handling building, and they're in poor shape due to the corrosive environment. We were having a hard time getting quotes for that. The capital budget had $25,000 in it for replacement. I was finally able to secure 2 estimates. There's some pictures up there behind you that, you know, you could really take a look. The doors are in really poor shape. They've just rotted out over the years. But Acme Door and Hardware, they want $15,228 for fiberglass doors, which includes parts and labor. Firewitz was $18,800 for fiberglass doors, which include parts and labor. Acme for the steel doors, parts, labor, and paint were $10,211.48. Firewitz door was $8,560 for the steel doors, and that's the same thing, includes paint, parts, and labor. I did a little bit of research on that. It would be nice, the fiberglass doors, but they're not as heavy as the steel doors. If we keep an eye on the environment there and make sure that we keep the corrosive environment down, I think the steel doors would work fine. Based on that, I would recommend going with the steel doors from Firewitz Commercial Doors, as we would save $1,651.48. Item 3, the Cool Valley project. The developers from GAI has sent us the master utility plan and illustrative plan. They provided some preliminary flow data. I forwarded this on to LSSE and Walt for a review comment. That is still in the process, so there's no change on that item for right now. Item number 4, I have to order some replacement UV bulbs for the disinfection process at the Millers Run wastewater treatment plant. We had those bulbs in stock, but we finally used them all up. The last time we ordered them was in 2020. Based on the operations maintenance manual, it calls for the bulbs to be replaced every 8,760 hours, which is yearly. But talking with the manufacturer, that can vary. These bulbs have never been replaced like they should be all at one time. I would recommend that we replace all the bulbs, as this is a critical portion of the treatment process. This way, we can go ahead and monitor the bulbs and set a maintenance schedule. This way, we would know how often we have to change them, because we may be able to get 2.5 years, 3 years, but they do not recommend in changing them out one at a time, because the bulbs lose their effectiveness over a point in time. We're up to about 62,000 hours on the meter, so I definitely am going to get some pricing for what it would cost to replace the bulbs. We have 5 banks of 4 bulbs each, so that is 20 bulbs we would need to replace. I will have prices for the meeting next month. Item 5, we've been having a pump issue at Teodori Wastewater Treatment Plant. We get a lot of rags and debris that enter the facility, and sometimes these will bypass the influent bar screen, and then it enters the flow equalization tank. This tank's aerated, so eventually those rags make it over to the sewage treatment portion of the plant with the pumps, and it causes them to plug. Then we have to have the operators pull the plug, pull the pumps and clean the plugs. They're very labor intensive to do that, safety-wise. So I found a product that may provide a solution to this. I don't want to put a lot of money because that plant's going to be coming offline and being updated. But this rack can collect these rags and can be moved to one of the other pump stations after this facility is upgraded. I'm going to look into it a little bit more, and I will have pricing and a recommendation for the March meeting. Item 6, the 2022 Municipal Waste Load Management Report, Chapter 94s. They're due by March 31st of 2023. Walt said he will, work with me on these because this is new to me here. I've never done them for this authority. So basically, I talked to Kevin about this, so it'll be a collaborative effort between myself, Walt, and LSSE. So that's working on that. We also received a letter from the PADEP that our NPDES permit for the Millers Run treatment plant will expire on January 31st, 2024. The renewal application is due by August 4th, 2023. The letter indicates there is no fee required because of the size of the plant, but I will confirm this to make sure. We'll have more information for the next meeting. Walt has renewed these before, so I'm going to check with him and see what's all needed to be done for the renewal process. I have one last item that is not on here. There is a class at the Beaver County Community College for operator certification. Hayden is our laborer. He has expressed interest in becoming certified, and we've been having a hard time finding certified operators. The class runs for about 6 months. It's twice a week. The cost is $2,000 plus $250 for the lab, but at the end of the class, he will take the license, and I've had good luck with this in the past. We actually certified our laborer at my previous employer. He passed on the first try. He is expressing interest, so I wanted to make the board aware of this. We did pay for our laborer. It's up to the board what they want to do with that, but I did want to let everybody know because this class does fill up quickly.
When is the sign-up deadline?
The classes start April 24th, so we have a little bit of time, but it's just I wanted to bring it to the forefront because he was on the fence the last couple of times we've been talking about being certified, and I spoke to him today a little bit about it. Just, it would be to his benefit, and he's definitely interested.
Okay, so we have time to defer that and put something on the agenda for our next meeting.
Yes, but I just wanted to give everybody, I can send out the information on it ahead of time so everyone can see, but I wanted to make sure that, I let everybody know, that he is interested.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions. As you're going down through the items that you're pricing and getting, going forward, can you tell us whether it's going to be an item that's expensed or whether it's capitalized?
I can do that.
Okay. And then what's the expectation on getting the information back on the Cool Valley project?
That should be fairly quickly. Basically, I spoke to the project manager there. There's been a problem there as well. The gentleman that I was working with, I called him the other day for something on the Chapter 94 report, and I've kind of figured out why he hasn't been returning my phone call, because he is no longer with the facility. He's no longer with GAI. There's a new gentleman getting up to snuff. I'm going to talk to Walt, I'll talk to Kevin. I would like to have a meeting before our March meeting so I can have a little bit more information on that. I'm not sure how far along they are. Jack, I don't know if you can answer this. Have they presented anything formally other than the illustrative plan or the master utility plan? Because I know they've been canceling.
We canceled the last one on the 15th, and that was a last-minute cancel, and we have no further information.
Okay, and that's where it's at. It's like they want us to get everything ready, but they're still not even anywhere close, with the township as well as us. But I'd like to just keep everything moving forward if I could.
Okay.
I'm going to say that thank you for keeping pushing them back to us, because that's the only way we found out anything is they were talking to you but weren't telling us anything.
Well, we all have to be on the same page with this, because like you said, there are certain things that have to be met by the township before we could even proceed with it, and there are certain things that we have to do that, you have to have, so they have to keep everybody in the loop.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mike? Review of correspondence. Are there any correspondence today?
I don't know if this is time for me to ask this question or not, but back in October, we were supposed to have the December meeting, which I wasn't here. But I got some feedback on his $4 increase on the storage bill. And it came to me from the standpoint that going from 18 to 22 is almost a 20% increase. Some residents were really upset. They went back and started doing some research, and I did too. I know we discussed that there would be a service charge, but did we ever discuss it and put it on the agenda and have a formal vote by us board members? I don't ever remember having a vote.
Yes, we did. We voted on the rate increases.
Okay, where do we find that in the minutes or on the agenda? And what video does that show in the CTMA meeting that Jack records?
Kevin presented rate increases that to get us through the Lawrence project.
Okay,
And those increases go for 5 years, I believe.
well, what I was getting at is that I don't ever remember us having that on the agenda and/or a resolution for us board members to actually vote that we would go ahead and pursue a $4 increase monthly, starting with February's storage bill. And like I says, I got some inquiries from the residents saying, when and where did this come about, and when did the board members of the CTMA vote on this to increase it, the service charge, by $4? And I went back, I looked everywhere, I couldn't find it. And I'm under the impression that it needed to be voted on. It needed to be on the agenda, and a resolution needed to be voted on by all the board members. And I don't ever remember voting that we were going to go ahead and increase it in February, because as a matter of fact, on October 18th meeting, Mr. Januso stated at the December meeting, the board would need to adopt a rate increase of $4 per month for the service charge. I wasn't here in December, but I did attend the December meeting, and I didn't see anything where we adopted a rate increase, and that's when I got hit with some of the residents saying, how could we go ahead and increase by $4, which is almost a 20% increase, and some of the people's bills aren't near as much as the service charge and/or the debt service fee. I've got a couple of them here that now the minimum service charge is $22. The actual wastewater charge is $14.45, and the debt service fee that I was advised by Mr. Januso that debt service fee will never go away, and that's a $10 charge. People are a little upset being that the fees are more than any of the wastewater charge. And I'm just here to say, well, when did we discuss this? When was it put on the agenda? And when was it voted on by all of us board members?
I do remember us talking about it. I'm looking at some of them now, and I can't find it, but I think we need to take the time to look for that and
I
ensure
do
that we...
too, because I looked way back to, you might as well say August or September. I know we talked about it.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any resolution put on, or it was on the agenda, or we voted on a resolution as a full board. And I even printed off Schedule A, and nothing has been changed in Schedule A. It's still reading $18 in our Schedule A. It hasn't been updated since 2021 in the Schedule A. So I'm concerned because I was asked by numerous residents, and a lot of them were from Muse. So I'm only doing my due diligence as a board member, saying that I personally did not vote.
I can't tell you what meeting it was because my memory's not that good, but I know it was presented to the board and we all voted on it and we approved it.
I have to see that where it was in the minutes, though, Mr. Januso.
It has to be in a minute somewhere.
Well, I went back and looked as far as I could. I couldn't find them, so maybe somebody's got a better eye than I.
Yeah, I don't see it in
Mike-
what I have, but I may be
Mike,
missing
I think,
something.
talk to Kevin. I know they presented it at one of the meetings and I know we voted on it and approved it.
Why was it that you brought it up in October meeting that you stated at December meeting, the board would need to adopt a rate increase of $4 per month for the service charge? That was October's meeting, monthly meeting minutes. But it was never brought up in December because I was in Aruba and I was listening to it, and it was never brought up. But yet the people got the bill attached to the increase attached to their bill.
Well, let's take a look at and ask Kevin for clarity on his reports that he would have during the engineer's report.
Yeah, I think it's wise, go back and look at the history. In any event that I don't know, haven't been to all the meetings, obviously, but I would say that to the extent that it's absent and we can't find it or justify that, then at the next meeting you ratify, do a motion to ratify it, and that could be on
And
the
can we
agenda.
continue on with this charge or this?
Sure,
being
and
the-
it could be ratified at the next meeting.
Is it able to be ratified retroactively?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, I will say this, though, that I think I, like you, would like to see what the history shows in the paperwork before I, can fully comment on that.
Yeah.
See what it says.
Yeah. We'll do
And-
some research and find
We
out.
could talk to Mike about it. Okay.
That's the best thing is to ask Kevin, because my understanding of it is that was a $4 increase, like Mr. Januso said, starting in 2023, and it moves over a period of 5 years to cover the cost of the new project.
And it's $4 increases over the next 5 years. So it's, at the end of 5 years, it's going to be almost a $20 increase or whatever. I know we voted on it, and I know we did.
Well, I'm looking for it. And it isn't that I
Okay.
just brought this up, just pulled it out of the air, especially being that you stated in our October 18th minutes that it would be brought up at the December meeting, and it was, and adopted.
Mike, when you're looking at the history there, you might want to look, it may have been covered under the engineer's report.
That's what I'm going to go
But
back
isn't
and
there a
see.
resolution and us being voted on? Wouldn't it have been in the minutes?
Again, I defer to Mr. Gianusso's comment about it being voted on. I don't know I don't know that I was
But
here.
would it be in our minutes if it wasn't in engineers when we made?
I
we
can't
took a
speak,
vote?
I can't speak to what's.
Okay, well, I did my due diligence, and I tried to find everything. I went back and looked, and I listened, and that's what I pulled up, and I guess what I owe is some of the residents an answer.
Sure. Okay, well, we'll do that research and definitely put that on the agenda for next month for whatever clarity it needs to be. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you.
Everybody needs to remember that, we adopted a unified rate for all of our plants. Remember, we used to have separate rates. Now we have a unified rate. We had a motion, we approved all of that. And then when Kevin presented the financing for the project, we approved all these increases, and they go for 5 years. So
every
It's
year,
a-
we're going to
it's a little-
increase it? Every year, we're going to increase it by $4? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying over?
yes,
So next year, it's going to go from 22 to 26? And then the
Yes.
following year, 30?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I remember, all I remember is it's going up $4 a year for 5 years.
And when will we ever get rid of that debt fee?
The only debt fee is on Miller's Run,
And it's been there
And
ever
that
since
act-
Millard's Run's
and that
began.
actually decreases a little bit every year until it goes down to zero. We dropped all the debt service and all the others.
And how many
area.
years have we
Well,
been
we
paying?
didn't have any, I don't think.
How many years have we been paying this debt service fee for Miller's Run?
Since its inception.
So I don't remember when I wasn't part of this for the inception. That's why I'm asking you, when did we have the
We've been-
inception?
Paying the debt service on Miller's Run since it was started.
About 18 years?
Something like that, yeah. I was gonna say it's about 20
2008
years.
sticks in my mind, but it might be wrong. I don't know why. that
Sounds
number-
about right.
What's that?
Around 2008, 2009.
2008, 2000, and
Somewhere
so it's
around
been
then.
10, it's been
Because I'm
$10
a
a
Miller's
month,
Run
every month
customer.
since 2008?
I don't know that date for sure, but that,
But, well, no, but
It's
I'm
just-
saying it's been,
Yes.
it's been $10 a month, every month since Miller's Run's been put in. Is it ever going to go away, is my question. That was a question that's been asked me since I got on this board. Are we ever going to do away with this debt service fee for the Miller's Run?
Wouldn't-
And the answer to that question is yes, that it's on a declining scale over the next 5 years where it goes down to zero.
Do we know who keeps that amortization schedule where we can just get our hands on it just to refresh our memories and know that if we
Kevin.
need to communicate?
Kevin
Okay.
has all that information.
Okay, this $10 has been on ever since since I've owned property, that I've been paying, that I'm responsible for sewerage. It's been $10 now for 5 years. It hasn't been on a declining rate. That's all I'm asking.
The $10 won't be on a declining rate because the declining rate is what you're paying on the bond that's being repaid. If you borrowed $8 million and your payment is just say 440,000, that's where the declining scale is. You won't see it on the $10 a month charge. That is this charge that was assessed to cover that debt fee if you borrowed $8 million. That $10 would stay on. So if you basically took the bond out for 30 years, that $10 would stay on for the 30-year period unless you paid it off early somehow. and that's when that would go away. But that's what that $10 is covering, is that, whatever the amount of the bond is, that's what each resident, would have to pay for that. That's what that $10 charge is. You won't see it declining on that monthly bill that way. The declining scale that Mr. Januso is speaking of is actually on the bond payment itself. So this year, the interest in that, so what you may see is it may be $235,000 this year. Next year, it would be $230,000. As you start going down and the interest is getting smaller, the principal payment gets larger. So that's what happens there. That's where you'd see the decreasing scale.
But you'll never see it go lower than $10. For the last 5 years, it's been $10 a month.
Yeah, that payment will stay at $10 a month.
Until that bond is paid off.
Correct.
And when is that bond supposed to be paid off or
I'm
called in?
not, that's something that we'd have to research. I'm not sure if it was taken out for 20 years, 30 years. That's something that I'd have to go in and take a look at and talk with Kevin on and get that information
I
for you.
would appreciate that, because that's another thorn in a lot of the senior citizens in this township, especially that are connected to the Millers project. They're just saying that it's $10, and they're not having a $10, $15 water bill, wastewater charge, but yet all the charges are double what they're paying for wastewater charge.
But I can go ahead and talk with Kevin on that and get the information on both items that you have expressed concern over.
I would appreciate it, just so that I can get an answer back. I don't want to make anybody any extra work, but I also want to feel that we're doing our due diligence also. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, any other correspondence or comments? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the payments of expenses and transfer of funds?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Januso?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Okay, are there any comments from the floor?
Yeah, just what she said about the $4 increase.
Come on up,
Sir, can I,
thanks.
talking this one or this one?
Yeah, I have a comment about the $4 increase, like she was saying. Why does the Miller's Run have to pay for the Lawrence? Why do I gotta be charged $4 to pay for a sewer straight plant in Lawrence when my stuff ain't even going there? As he said. And as far as the $10 fee, I was told I think it's gonna be on there until 2035 before it disappears, if I remember correctly.
Oh, so that's what you heard. Okay.
That's what I heard.
So we'll research that. I don't know the answer to that question, but we're going to find that out based on what we know from the inception of Miller. As far as the calculation on the $4 fee, was that was a calculation that came from?
The engineer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because.
I mean,
I can't speak much to the actual calculation itself.
like I said, how many residents that include? In fact, that $4.
I would assume, I don't know the answer, but I would assume, and we'll find this out, that calculation was based on living units across the board within Cecil Township that are already tapped into the sewage, but I don't know the answer to that question.
I was told 3,800 people are getting that $4 increase. You take that times 1 year, that's $182,400 you guys are gonna collect in 1 year.
Well,
On top of the $820,800 is just for the $18 charge. So that's over $1 million you're gonna collect on that charge for the year.
so are you in the Miller's
Yes.
Run project?
Yes, and that's
So all other Cecil Township residents would have been paying for Miller's Run at that time too?
Yep,
Increase, and so part of the Lawrence project would be the same type of calculation across the board for an $18 million facility on a wildcat sewer that is going to just help the community.
well, why don't you make these new housing plans pay the bill? Like up here in Burnside, they're gonna put how many houses up there? And that's gonna flow down here. Next thing you know, you're gonna want another increase for this plant because this plant can't handle what it's gonna take.
That's part of the calculation on the tap-in fees.
Miller's Run treatment plant is more than capable of taking the housing plan that's going to be coming in from Burnside. They will be paying the same amount as what everyone else is paying. They're not getting a different rate. They will be paying whatever the tap-in fee is in the Miller's Run watershed for the tap-in. It's $6,400. They'll be paying $6,400 per tap. Again, that $4 increase, yes, it's going to generate $182,000, but that is going towards the upgrades to the plants that are there. We're not going to see any of that. It's to keep the facilities modern, and it's not like it's going anywhere but back into the facilities.
Why don't you take a bond out on the ones that need increased, and leave these people, us alone down here? Charge Lawrence a $10 fee and take a bond out. Why should I have to pay for their plan?
Well, that $4 is not part of paying for their plant,
That's
correct?
what he said it was.
It's a maintenance of all.
That's across the board for everything. Again, like I said, to get you the correct answers, we'd have to do a little bit more research on how that calculation was done. And again, Kevin is not here tonight to give you, to be able to give you an answer on how the $4 was come across.
Well, this township is getting like Allegheny County, worse every year. Every year.
Sir, what is your name?
My name's Gary Mills.
What is it?
Gary Mills.
Gary Mills?
Yes, I live up in Redwood Drive. Huh? 728 Redwood Drive, McDonald, PA.
728 Redwood Drive.
Yep.
Okay. You're not the only one that is, I've been hammered
Yes.
ever since this came out.
Yeah.
And that's
like you
why I
said.
had to bring this up. And I feel for the people that,
My water bill, my sewer bill's more than, less than what the fees are, just like you said.
Well,
That's all I gotta
just
say.
also keep in mind the age of all of the plants across Cecil Township, in that there's maintenance that has to be done everywhere. Everything has gone up in price.
No, I understand that.
Well, that's what that $4 is handling.
Yeah, but $4, and then the following year, $4 more. The following year, $4 more.
Because
That's
every year,
ridiculous.
something's gonna go wrong with one of these plants. And it could be a major something wrong with one of these
Yeah.
plants. The analysis was done by the engineering company, so for the next meeting, I think that we should ask Kevin to bring forth some more information around why and how that is being spent. And maybe let's look into those bonds and when those payoffs are. Mike?
I have that written down. I have that written down. That's on my list to get that information for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sorry we don't have
All right.
direct answers for you tonight.
I'll be here next meeting to find out.
Okay,
I've been
okay.
sorry, but that's,
Anybody else? All right. With nothing else, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, good night.